Hey there! Welcome back to the channel. Do you know what haunts a person the most? It's not the words they never heard. It's the silence they never expected. They thought you'd always be there. They thought no matter how many times they pushed you away, you'd fight harder to prove your worth. They believed your love was a guarantee, something they could lose, walk away from, and still find waiting whenever they decided to come back. They walked away thinking you'd chase, thinking you'd beg, thinking you'd break first. But what they never prepared for was your silence. Because silence is the one thing they can't control. When you stop explaining, stop fighting, stop proving yourself, you strip away their power without even lifting a finger. They expected anger. They expected pain. They expected long messages filled with explanations about how much they hurt you. But silence? Silence leaves them alone with the one thing they fear the most, their own reflection. At first, they feel relief. They convince themselves you're just giving them space, that any moment now you'll come crawling back with one more apology, one more chance. But what they don't realize is that your silence isn't a game. It's a decision. The moment you chose silence over explanation is the moment their ego started to crumble. Silence doesn't feed their ego. It starves it. It forces them to face the truth they've been running from this entire time. The truth that maybe you weren't the weak one. Maybe they were the ones being tolerated. Maybe they were the ones who lost someone who would have loved them forever. They thought they broke you by leaving, but your silence is breaking them in ways they'll never admit out loud. Because silence creates doubt, and doubt is the slowest, most painful poison to the human mind. They start checking your social media. They start rereading old messages. They start replaying every memory, trying to figure out if they ever really knew you at all. They wanted you to chase them. Because as long as you're chasing, they don't have to feel the weight of what they've lost. But the moment you go silent is the moment they realize something they never saw coming. You're not chasing them. You're replacing them. This isn't about playing mind games. This isn't about revenge. This is about finally giving them what they gave you. Nothing. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can ever say is absolutely nothing at all. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly why your silence is hurting them more than you think, the hidden stages they're going through behind closed doors, and how to hold your silence in a way that not only reprograms their mind, but rebuilds your own self-worth in the process. If you've ever questioned whether your silence is making a difference, by the end of this video, you'll understand why it's the most powerful response you'll ever give. Let's get started. Number 1. Why silence hurts more than words. Silence is the one language the human mind can't ignore. Words can be debated, twisted, or blocked out. But silence forces a person to sit with themselves. And that is where the real battle begins. When someone expects you to chase them, your silence isn't just confusing, it's painful. Because what they really wanted was to feel important enough to trigger your reaction. They expected anger. They expected long explanations. They expected you to fight to prove your worth one last time. But what they never expected was for you to do nothing at all. The power of silence lies in what it doesn't give them. No closure, no comfort, no reassurance that they're still in control. It creates an empty space in their mind that only they can fill. And the human mind is cruel when left alone. The first few days they convince themselves you're just trying to play hard to get. They tell themselves you're waiting by your phone, dying for them to reach out. But as the days turn into weeks, that silence starts whispering darker thoughts into their head. What if you're not playing games? What if you're really done? What if you're moving on without them? That doubt becomes the slow poison they never saw coming. And the worst part? They're doing it to themselves. The ancient Stoics believed that power isn't in what you say, it's in what you choose not to say. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned through life's many sufferings. Your silence is teaching them a lesson their ego was never prepared for, that you're no longer suffering for someone who was never willing to suffer for you." Every time they check their phone and see nothing, it hurts. Every time they refresh your social media and find no sad posts, it stings. Every time they try to provoke you with indirect posts and you give them nothing, it breaks them a little more. Because now the question burning in their mind isn't whether you're hurting, it's whether you ever really needed them at all. What makes silence more powerful than words is that it forces them to create their own version of the story. And the mind always imagines the worst. Maybe you're healing, maybe you're happy, maybe you're with someone better. The truth doesn't even matter. What matters is that they're realizing the person they thought would always be there isn't waiting anymore. They thought they broke you. But your silence is proving they only broke the version of you that tolerated being disrespected. The greatest power in silence is that it shifts the entire dynamic without a single word. You're no longer the one chasing. You're the one being chased, without lifting a single finger. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments right now. My silence is my power. Because when you finally learn how to walk away without a fight, that's the day they realize they lost someone they never deserved. Number 2. The hidden stages they go through. Your silence isn't just something they notice, it's something they feel. What most people don't realize is that silence doesn't hit them all at once. It breaks them down slowly, stage by stage, in ways they'll never admit out loud. The first stage is relief. In the beginning, they convince themselves that you're just giving them space, that you're playing some temporary mind game to get their attention. Their ego whispers, "They'll be back. They always come back." They actually feel a sense of control in your silence at first, believing it's only a matter of time before you reach out with one more apology, one more chance. But what they don't realize is that your silence isn't a pause. It's the final answer to a question they've been testing for far too long. Then comes curiosity. Days go by, then weeks, and the message they were so sure they'd get never arrives. That's when the checking starts. They scroll through your social media, watching your stories in secret. They look for any sign that you're still hurting. Maybe a sad quote, maybe a breakup song, maybe something indirect to show them you're still waiting in the shadows. But the most painful thing they can ever see is nothing at all. No sad posts, no indirect messages, no proof that you're still suffering over them. Just silence. And that silence starts to eat at them in ways they can't explain. The human mind hates the unknown, and when someone can't figure out what you're thinking, their imagination will always assume the worst. That's when frustration kicks in. They might start testing you, liking old pictures, posting things they know will trigger you, or showing off their life to make you feel like they're better off without you. But when you stay silent, when you don't fall for the bait, it drives them insane. Because now, for the first time, they're the one feeling powerless. The next stage is fear. Fear that you're not playing games. Fear that you're really moving on. Fear that someone else is replacing everything they took for granted. And the truth is, the more time that passes without a response, the more their mind starts creating stories that hurt them more than any truth ever could. They thought your silence meant you were weak. But now, that same silence is making them question if they were the weak one all along. Because why would someone who truly loved them let them go so easily. And that's when the final stage hits: regret. Every memory they took for granted starts replaying in their mind like a movie they can't turn off. Every time you forgave them, every time you fought for them, every time you cried behind closed doors trying to fix what they broke. Those moments hit harder when you're no longer there to remind them. They'll never tell anyone how much your silence is breaking them. Their pride won't allow it. They'll try to act unbothered on the outside, while breaking into 1,000 pieces on the inside. But the longer your silence holds, the heavier that regret becomes, until eventually they break. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "If you wish to be strong, learn to enjoy being misunderstood." That's exactly what your silence is doing, letting them misunderstand your strength, while you quietly rebuild yourself behind closed doors. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments right now. I'm choosing silence because I'm choosing myself. Remember, the person who stays silent holds all the power. Number 3, how your silence is reprogramming their mind. Your silence isn't just hurting them, it's reprogramming their entire perception of you. When someone walks away, they expect your pain to revolve around them. They expect proof that they mattered. What they never expect is for you to disappear without a fight. The moment you go silent, the story they've been telling themselves about who you are starts to fall apart. Every second that passes without a message is forcing their mind to rewrite the version of you they thought they knew. At first, they saw you as someone who would always wait, someone they could lose without ever really losing. But silence strips away that false power. Every time they check their phone and find nothing, their mind starts filling in the blanks. Maybe you weren't as weak as they made you feel. Maybe you were never chasing them. You were just choosing them. And now that you're gone, they're starting to question if they ever really had you at all. The human mind can't stand unanswered questions. Did you ever really need them? Were they special? Or were they just another chapter in your life? The more silence you give, the louder those questions become. And what breaks them the most isn't the silence itself. It's the fact that they'll never know the answer. That doubt starts rewiring their entire perception of who they thought they were to you. They used to believe they were the prize. Now your silence is making them wonder if they were just being tolerated. What they don't realize is that your silence isn't a punishment. It's a reflection. You're not trying to hurt them. You're simply showing them how life feels without your energy feeding their ego. And the longer your silence holds, the more valuable your absence becomes. Every time they replay old conversations or scroll through your pictures, they're slowly convincing themselves that they lost something they'll never find again. The philosopher Seneca once said, "The greatest revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Your silence is proving that you're no longer the person they could manipulate. You're no longer the person who needed closure, explanations, or validation. You're becoming the person they always feared you could be. Someone who can walk away without looking back. What makes silence so powerful is that it leaves them trapped inside their own mind. They can't argue with silence. They can't block it out. They can't manipulate it. Every second you're silent is slowly reprogramming their mind to see you as the one who always had the power. They were just too blinded by their own ego to realize it. By the time they finally break and reach out, you'll already be a version of yourself they will never get access to again. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments right now. My silence is teaching them what my presence never could. Number 4. How to keep your silence powerful. The hardest part of silence isn't starting. It's staying silent when your heart is screaming to explain. The mind craves closure. The ego craves validation. But the moment you break your silence just to prove a point, you hand your power right back to the person who made you feel powerless in the first place. The secret to keeping your silence powerful is to understand that silence isn't just about what you're not saying. It's about what you're becoming while you're saying nothing at all. Silence only holds power if you're growing in it. This is your season to rebuild everything they tried to break. Start working out. Start journaling. Start rediscovering the version of yourself that existed before they convinced you that you weren't enough. Every morning you choose self-discipline over self-pity. You're silently telling them, "I'm not coming back." Every time you heal a part of yourself they took for granted, you're proving that their absence is no longer your weakness. It's your greatest opportunity. Don't just disappear, transform. The most powerful silence is the one that forces them to question if they ever really knew you at all. Let them see your glow without hearing a single word from you. Don't block them. Don't unfollow them. Let them watch from a distance while you quietly become the version of yourself they never thought you'd be without them. What will break them the most isn't your silence. It's watching the life you're building in that silence. The Stoic philosopher Zeno of Citium once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen more than we speak." Your silence is teaching them a lesson louder than any explanation ever could, that you're no longer seeking validation from someone who couldn't even see your value when they had you. Every second you stay silent is rewiring their mind to realize that you were the prize all along. The key is to stay focused on your own growth. Silence becomes weak when you're using it just to punish them. But when you're using it to finally pour all that energy back into yourself, it becomes undeniable power. They're not going to regret losing you because you're silent. They're going to regret losing you because the person you're becoming would never look twice in their direction again. This isn't about making them miss you. It's about making yourself so whole that their regret becomes completely irrelevant. That's the version of you they never wanted to meet, and the one they'll never have access to again. Number 5. When will they break? They'll break the moment they realize you're not waiting for them anymore, not when they see you're silent, but when they understand that your silence isn't a reaction, it's a decision. It won't happen in the first week. It won't happen in the first month. It'll happen when the version of you who used to beg, cry, and fight for them becomes nothing but a memory they can't touch anymore. At first, they'll convince themselves you're playing games, that you're trying to punish them by staying silent. But silence doesn't break people instantly, it breaks them slowly. When reality starts replacing their ego-driven assumptions, they'll scroll through your old messages at 2 a.m., looking for the version of you who used to fight to be heard. They'll replay the conversations where you begged them to stay, and they'll wonder how the person who once gave them endless chances suddenly gave them none. They'll break when they realize you're not angry, you're not bitter, you're not blocking them to prove a point, you're not posting sad quotes to get their attention, you're not trying to make them jealous or chase them back into your life. You're simply gone. Nothing haunts the human mind more than someone who could have had everything, but chose to give them nothing. Some will break in weeks, others will break in months. The timing doesn't matter, because the longer it takes, the heavier the regret will hit. The more they delay reaching out, the more they convince themselves you're moving on. And when they finally break, when they finally reach out, what will destroy them the most isn't your silence itself. It's the version of you they'll be reaching out to, the one who no longer needs their apology, the one who no longer waits for closure, the one who realized that losing them was the best thing that ever happened. By the time they break, they'll be hoping to get back the old version of you, the one who would have picked up on the first ring. What they'll never understand is that your silence didn't just hurt them, it rebuilt you. The most powerful response you'll ever give is nothing at all, not because you're trying to hurt them, but because the person they once broke no longer exists. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Your silence isn't revenge, it's evolution." They'll break when they realize you're not holding back your words, you're holding back your access. And no amount of regret will ever unlock the door they've already closed on themselves. Your silence is not punishment, it's protection. Every second you hold your silence, you're breaking the cycle of proving your worth to someone who was never meant to see it. Let them wonder. Let them regret. Let them feel your absence, because your silence is the loudest message you'll ever send. If you're choosing your self-worth over chasing someone who never valued you, comment below, "I choose myself." And if you're ready to turn your silence into power, subscribe, because this is just the beginning of your glow-up journey.